When I was a kid going to boarding school, almost every weekend I would come down to London with one of my best friends, Omar. We'd share a room, we'd do our separate things, but we always meet for one meal at the Japan Center. Back in the day, it was in Piccadilly, and we'll always have gyudon. I still remember they used to write organic beef gyudon on the menu, because organic back in the day was the it word. I think now it doesn't even make top 20. But in truly authentic Japanese style, they would serve the gyudon piping hot with a raw egg. It took a bit of convincing for my friend to try it for the first time, but now he cannot eat gyudon without the raw egg. It was so good that I got a text message from him 2 nights ago, without context, just saying Japan Center gyudon. So, let's make some gyudon. It's very simple, and once you have your rice, this whole thing cooks really quickly. So, first, let's make a quick dashi. Today I'm just using dashi sachet. You can do a homemade dashi, you can just use powder. Because of the strong flavors, I would normally just use the sachet. So, a bit of water, and you just bring this to a boil. Now, since everything cooks so quickly, we first prepare our scallion garnish. For the gyudon, you only really want the green part, just to add a bit of freshness and to contrast with the colors of the beef. I like to slice them thin lengthwise. Now, optional step to help them curl up beautifully, we're just going to add some ice water and leave this in the fridge. Now we prep the onion. Dashi is good to go. You just remove the sachet from the pot. So for the onion, I like to cut them lengthwise, not crosswise, because that's how Japan Center used to do it. Oh, dough knife. That's what makes you cry, not the onion. Looks like a lot, but they're going to shrink down a tiny bit. Perfect. Now we can cook. Medium-high heat. So, traditionally, the beef and the onions, they're simmered in a mixture of sake, soy sauce, sugar, and dashi. For me, I prefer to substitute the sake and the sugar with a bit of mirin, and we'll reduce it a bit to thicken the sauce so that we have the natural sweetness of the mirin and a similar complexity of the sake. So, mirin goes in. And reduced mirin, it's almost nature's thickener, so you have a sauce that clings on to your beef and your onions a bit better. Now, once the smell of the alcohol has mostly disappeared and you see a thicker texture of the mirin, we can add the soy sauce. And be a bit generous with the soy sauce. This is your only seasoning. Now, once this is back to a boil, I like to add the onions at this stage so that it's easier for them to take on some color, not browning, the dark color of the soy sauce, before we add the dashi. And you let them simmer a bit. This way you get way more flavorful onions than you would if you just added everything together and brought it to a boil. Because as much as you're bringing umami, you're also diluting the other flavors. Now, once they've taken on the color of the soy sauce, we start to slowly add our dashi. Just to cover everything. And we simmer this at medium to medium-high heat until the onions are softened. And the very last minute, we'll add the beef to simmer. For me, gyudon is a simmered dish. There should be no searing or browning whatsoever. I'm not saying searing and browning wouldn't bring you flavors, but that's a completely different flavor profile. Now, once you can barely see the white color from the onions, that's when we add our beef. For gyudon, you want thinly sliced beef. Ideally, I like to use ribeye just because you get a bit of the fat and none of the chewiness. And you can find them in most Asian supermarkets. They'd be labeled beef for shabu shabu or beef for hot pot. You can even buy them frozen. Again, this is a simmered dish. I'm not cooking my beef medium rare, so as long as they're thinly sliced, they do the job. But if you can't find thinly sliced beef. You can just slice them as thinly as possible and just increase the cooking time slightly to account for the thickness. And just like how you would mother a risotto, top up the dashi, just enough to cover everything. Once the beef is fully cooked, if I'm using a fatty cut, I like to give it just a minute or two more for the fat to render down a bit, so that you don't end up with chewy fat and the beef fat beautifully emulsified with the rest of the sauce. Stove off, and we can plate. We have a bowl of rice, and we just very generously add our beef with the onions and this beautiful sauce. I almost want the rice at the bottom of the bowl to be soaked in this beefy goodness. Two optional ingredients. We have Japanese pickled ginger, beni sugar, just to give it a bit of brightness. Grated ginger also would work magic with this dish. The curled up scallion that we made earlier. And, of course, with any simmered beef dishes, shichimi togarashi. And finally, the real star of the show, the raw egg. You need to make it well. The egg goes in. Just like 20 years ago. And there you have it. This is organic beef gyudon for Omar. I really hope you enjoy. Beautiful, huh?